2, 1. Hello, hello everybody. Hello and
Hello.
welcome along to today's Mindful Leadership podcast. And today we have my dear friend Natasha Rocha and our special guest Michelle Matthews. Hello, hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome, Michelle. So good to see you. Let me do a quick intro. Got your bio here. So Michelle Matthews is an experienced clinical naturopath whose career started over 20 years ago in Australia and then progressed to Kenya and Scotland, running a number of clinics in Edinburgh. And Michelle has a wide variety of patients who presented with various health conditions and health issues over the span of her clinical career. So commonly, exhaustion, fatigue, and stress was prevalent in many of her patients, from the young to the elderly. Michelle now resides back in her home country of Australia, teaching, presenting, writing, researching as a head of education and training for a leading Australian vitamin brand. Michelle's passionately continues to educate and advise, using her expertise, knowledge about health, well-being, and complementary healthcare to help others achieve a balanced, fulfilling, and healthy life. In addition, she features regularly on Australian radio and podcasts as a health expert and clinical practitioner, sharing her wealth of complementary healthcare knowledge and experience. And today she's talking to us about a very, very interesting subject. We're looking at adrenal burnout and what does that mean and how to address this naturally. And I think a lot of us might be suffering from this and we don't even know it. So Michelle, would you like to add anything to that? Could you introduce adrenals and how they work and the rest of that?
Yes, thank you. It's so wonderful to be here on your podcast, John and Natasha. And I thought I would share a little bit of insight into adrenal burnout. Now, perhaps it's a term that your listeners have heard of before, or perhaps even listeners have actually experienced. But it's quite important to understand where and what the adrenals are. Now, believe it or not, they're very tiny little glands that sit on top of your kidneys. Now, most of us know where our kidneys are, but they actually sit on top of the kidneys, and they're actually part of a larger system within the body called our endocrine system. And the endocrine system is a combination of different glands in the body. So that includes things like your pituitary glands, the reproductive organs are glands, and we also have our thyroid, which is also our gland as well. But I always used to describe the adrenal system to my patients as these two little battery packs that we have, that we are born with, and they're fueled with energy, and we utilize them to the best of our ability, and we use the fuel and the energy from the adrenal system. And some people are very good at using fuel at a staggered approach, so it kind of, they have no real issues, they're very staggered. But in some cases, some people really like to have a gung-ho life. They live a very high energy life, and what happens is that they can really exhaust these energy packs throughout their life. And the thing is, with our adrenal system, whilst they are our energy packs of the body, it does actually take quite a little bit of time for the body to recover and refuel and recuperate when we've exhausted our adrenal system. And you may know, or perhaps you've heard of, certain hormones within the body as well, like cortisol and adrenaline. And these are just some of the hormones that the adrenal system produces. Now, adrenaline is a hormone that you may know as flight or fight. Now, in modern day society, we don't really get chased that often by lions anymore. But in modern stress and the way that we live our life, we're perhaps constantly connected. We are now accessible all the time. Sometimes people work from home and they think that they'll just jump on the computer and do a little bit more work. And this kind of constant access and living a high-powered modern life where we have lots of external stresses and demands on the body, it's the adrenaline that is giving this constant spurt. Now, adrenaline is actually a hormone that is only required as required. It's not, it shouldn't be constantly exerted from the adrenal system. But sometimes you may have heard of the expression where people, oh, I'm just running on adrenaline, or perhaps you've experienced that yourself. The other hormone that we do have, or one of the other hormones, is cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone that is produced by the adrenal system, and that actually benefits the body in so many ways. It's actually predominantly released in the morning, so your body is ready and going for that cortisol injection in the morning, and then it has a rise in the morning, and it should deplete by the end of the day. But what can happen is it sometimes also have excess cortisol production, and that can lead to a number of health conditions. Some are subtle, some are not so subtle. There's other contributing factors to elevated cortisol, but it can be a little bit detrimental to our health and our well-being as well.
Wow.
So the adrenal gland also produces other hormones as well. We have our sex hormones that the adrenal system contributes to. So we have our reproductive organs that produce sex hormones, but so does our adrenal system as well. And it also contributes to those other glands as part of the endocrine system. So they synergistically really work together to help the body keep in a state of balance as well. Now, being on top of the kidneys, the adrenal system does have an influence on our kidney function as well. And our kidneys are responsible for our water and salt balance, and it has a contributing factor to our blood pressure as well. So when you perhaps have elevated blood pressure, it can be actually an indication of stress within the body, not only just about, there's an element of physiology, narrowing of the arteries as well. Perhaps there's an element of stress contributing to that blood pressure as well. And when clients come into me for exhaustion and fatigue, sometimes they've experienced fatigue for quite some time. Sometimes they have thought, oh, if I just go on a holiday or I have a little break for a week or so, then everything will be back to normal again. And what can happen when people do experience adrenal burnout, that's not the case. That, if they do take a break, if they take some time off work, if they go on a holiday, it's those remedies that don't necessarily alleviate their fatigue, and therefore they have something that is a little bit more deeper and prevalent that needs to be addressed as well.
Wow.
Adrenal fatigue can kind of come in stages. So if we look at it in comparison to our stress, there's certainly a number of stages. We don't often go from 0 to 100 and you have adrenal burnout. It is kind of in a bit of a staggered approach. And sometimes as individuals and humans, we may have been told it's okay, you just soldier on, you'll be okay in a day or two. So we do really need to acknowledge ourselves when we are tired and fatigued, and also need to know ourselves as well, I think is also quite important. So one of the first stages is actually the alarm stage, and this is the early sign of stress. So we have slight elements that stress may be taking its toll on the body, and it may have small signals starting that may raise the alarm. So perhaps blood pressure may be an indication where it's a little bit elevated than normal. Other things that can also affect our or an indication of an alarm stage is also frequent bowel movements, or perhaps we're easily agitated, or perhaps there may be incidences where you're in a situation and you feel as though that there is an element of sweating coming on. This can be a sign of alarm stage where the adrenaline is really kicked in, and it seems to be, these episodes seem to be more prevalent than they have been perhaps in the past as well, for sure.
Night sweats, for one, could be related, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do like something like night sweats sometimes? Could they be related?
Yes. Yeah, so night sweats, that can certainly be an incident, providing it's not perimenopausal or menopause. But if you find it's often the case, I find, is that when you're in a state of rest as well, where you've kind of finally stopped and slowed down, is that sometimes these symptoms can appear in the forefront, which can be a little bit overwhelming because you don't know really what's happening or what's going on. It can be a little bit alarming for an individual because they've perhaps come out of that stressful situation, and then they may experience some symptoms like their bowels are more frequent. It can go the other way as well. Constipation can be an issue. Or they may experience sweating, or perhaps they feel suddenly anxious and apprehensive about something for no real apparent reason. And these incidences are becoming more frequently. Then we go into the second stage, and that's the resistance stage. And this is like the middle ground. So things may be going on for quite some time, maybe about 3 to 6 months, for example. But you have the ability to maintain a level of normality. So you can still function, but perhaps on a daily basis for a couple of months, or perhaps more frequently a few times a week, these symptoms seem to be a little bit more prevalent as well. So this kind of scenario, people may find that there are more days in a week where they're finding it difficult to get out of bed, for example. You've been on a holiday, or you're taking a few days off, and you feel perhaps recharged at that point and moment in time. But when you are thrown back into your stressful situation, you've kind of taken a step back to where you were previously. The holiday or the few days off haven't necessarily recharged yourself. Another thing may be frequent infections as well. You just seem to be getting colds and flus a little bit more frequently, for an example. And then you may, for women and also for men in particular, maybe there's a decline in their sex drive, or for women, they experience a change in their hormonal status as well. So that can be an indication that things are happening. You're perhaps at the second stage of resistance of stress. And don't forget, as I said before, that the adrenal system is part of an endocrine system, and that's a signaling system. And it is true that the adrenal system obviously release these hormones, but they can have a knock-on effect on these other glands as part of the endocrine system as well. So it's these little things, I think, that you need to be a little bit more self-conscious and a little bit more self-aware of, to maybe just stop and take a step back and think, gosh, what are these things that I'm experiencing? I haven't been experiencing these things, before. I didn't experience these things 6 months ago. And of course, if you are concerned about that, it's always important to seek professional help to help you identify what these symptoms mean to you. Obviously, if it's more prevalent and a little bit concerning, you would talk to your GP, but perhaps you have a complementary therapist that may help you identify what's going on at a deeper level as well. And then we come into the third stage, which is exhaustion stage. And this is really where we get to adrenal burnout, where the body is in like a holding pattern, and you feel as though you are just simply going through the motions of life, really. This is where you may start to feel really fatigued and anxious. Perhaps depression and low mood may also come into that aspect as well, that you may have not necessarily experienced before. And the other area is that your emotions can just feel a little bit uncontrollable. You feel as though that you're having perhaps bouts of crying, or you feel as though that you're crying for no apparent reason, or someone has said something to you, for example, and you just react with emotional outpouring. The other things may also include unable to concentrate at work, and you're forgetting things as well, can be an element of adrenal burnout as well. I would certainly say at this point, though, is that you may ask perhaps, okay, is adrenal burnout, if I go to the doctor, is the doctor going to tell me that I have adrenal burnout? What are they going to be looking for? To be honest, there's no real hard and fast rule or test, I should say, for adrenal burnout. They may do blood test. They may help to identify or look at your hormonal status, or they may even look at your thyroid or your thyroid hormones, because remember, the thyroid is part of that endocrine system. And when they do look at hormones from a naturopathic point of view, I would certainly say that you may get these tests done, blood tests, and they look generally within a range. They're looking at a range of parameters to measure certain hormones in the body. And as long as you are generally within that range, you may be given the advice that everything is okay because you're within that range. But you may be at the low end of the range, you may be at the high end of the range. So when we test for hormones, which we do in a naturopathic clinical setting, we don't do it through a blood test. We actually do it through a saliva test, because your hormones that relate to your adrenal system actually vary over the day. And the saliva is a very good indicator of what your hormones are like over that day. And unlike blood tests, we don't take one snapshot at a point in time of a blood test. We often measure hormones through the saliva between a 24 to 72 hour period. So it's much more indicative and I guess more prescriptive to give you an understanding of what your hormone levels are like over a certain time frame of a few days, rather than a particular snapshot through a blood test at one particular point in time, because that cannot necessarily be very reflective of what is happening, over a 24-hour period, for example. So that is one particular way that we look at these hormones that the adrenal system manufactures. We also look at other hormones as well that the total endocrine system can produce. And again, that can be a snapshot over a number of days rather than just one particular point in time. And when we look at hormones, actually, hormones, what we call, are active in the tissue site. So hormones travel through the blood, which you are taking a pinpoint of what's going through the blood, but you're not necessarily measuring the level of active hormones in the tissue site. And that's why we do saliva testing over a number of days or a 24-hour period at different times of the day as well. So that's quite an interesting viewpoint when we are trying to identify what stage perhaps of either the alarm, the resistant, or the exhaustion stage as well. It's quite interesting, actually. So, yeah, that gives you a little bit of an overview of what things perhaps you can look out for, how people do experience adrenal burnout. We are all different. But before you get to the final stage of adrenal burnout, there are certain signs and symptoms that I've just talked about to help you identify perhaps how you regulate and monitor your stress levels as well.
Oh, fantastic. I had so many questions and you just kept answering them, which is just so fantastic. So this experience I had 2 years ago, so at that point I'd been in a global corporate for 6 years at that time. I was a senior manager and I managed other managers and then other teams, and it was very fast paced. We worked with teams around, we're based in Scotland and we work with teams in Canada and the US. And so there was always it felt like every day you were kind of racing before the West Coast North America woke up. And then once they woke up, you were in, and often most days anyway, just in back-to-back meetings. and I think the pandemics like didn't help in some respects, because you found it harder to, I don't know, even like I would just start the day with a big flask of coffee, and I would just, sometimes I wouldn't find myself leaving my desk for like 5 hours at a time. And I do remember some of the what I felt were quite unusual physical symptoms that I was experiencing, because I felt like I was burning out. Like I felt like I was on this track where, I'd started meditating a few years prior to that every day. So I'd start the day after my morning run in a really, really great frame of mind. My body felt quite relaxed. I felt like, and I don't know much about cortisol levels, and I wonder if that's also like, I'm very much a morning person. But I felt in the morning there was this place of calm, this oasis. It was about 10 minutes of meditation. I was like, this feels good. This feels like me. And then pretty much as soon as I opened my laptop, drank a coffee, and started, typing away on emails and just straight into back-to-back meetings, I felt that it did take a toll on my health, but I didn't really know what it was until I started to see, either when I went on holiday, vacation, where I would see a different health completely. I was like, hang on, I feel calm and relaxed, and it would take 2 or 3 days at least before I came down. And then I also remember something that really got me into energy healing was, a friend did a session for me, and it blew my mind. They were on the other side of the world. They were in Dallas, and they did a session for me while I was sleeping. And the next day I remember waking up, and it's like I wasn't so aware of it before, but once it lifted, there was this real heaviness on my chest, and it felt almost like I don't know, maybe I'd given up smoking 20 years prior to that. It almost felt a bit like that, like this kind of heavy mist on my chest. And it was like all those times that in meetings I'd said, oh, okay, or just, complied, or not spoken my truth, or, shared my feelings, that I was bottling up all this energy. And when my friend did this session for me, I felt so different, like very similar to like I'd had a holiday. And again, it was like this other reference point for me. It was like, John, there's something about your health that's not right. And later, so in my immediate answer was, I decided to go part-time. I went to a 3-day working week, although those were very intense, of like about 10 to 12 hours each day. I found that I would go through this roller coaster. So the roller coaster would be, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I'd be like pretty happy, and I felt like calm and relaxed. But there's always this anxiety building up for my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday days. And as last year, as I trained as a mindfulness meditation teacher, I started running meditation sessions at my work. And that also really opened my eyes, because I realized that some of the feedback people would say, they'd say things like, I can't do meditation. I need to be like jacked up. I need to be like on my coffee, on my game, answering, like firing all cylinders all the time. And I found that quite shocking, that actually some people felt that it was really good. The majority, certainly people that came to the meditation sessions, described it as this oasis of calm. They said, like, even just those 10 minutes, I find myself relaxed and connected with my body, and I'm filling my air with lungs, and I feel much calmer, more abundant, and I seem to be able to be much more productive in the afternoons.
Yeah, it's interesting actually that you say that, because when I had clients that came to me and they were exhausted and fatigued, and very similar, I've seen clients like that, John. They've been told, oh no, just get over it, just do some exercise, just power on. But what it actually does, it sends the adrenal system even further downhill, really, because the approach that you take naturopathically is actually, you need to rest and revive the adrenal system. Remember at the start I was saying, like, you've got these little backpacks and they're fueled up, and you have to refuel those little backpacks. And one way that the adrenal system does that is actually to not completely stop, but certainly reevaluate And often the recommendations that I would give were very similar to what you experienced, is things like meditation and gentle yoga and self-care and awareness, to actually give the time to yourself to actually recuperate and recover. Because what can happen, I did find, is that there may be an element of recovery, but if they don't persist and perhaps do it long enough, they can slowly slip back into that fatigue. And with that, they can also bring conditions perhaps that they've never had previously. I like to call it as never well since. I've never recovered, I've never been well since ABC, for example. And really, when you talk about naturopathic healing or any kind of complementary healing, you do kind of start with the most immediate concerns for an individual, but it's also a bit of a process as well. And the adrenal system and your recovery around that is very much entrenched into that process. So people may recover perhaps from their initial condition that they've come and seen you for, but then you kind of regress and go back through other conditions that they've had 2, 3, 5 years ago. And those conditions from that time can actually be quite a contributing factor to where they are today with their adrenal burnout as well. So when you talk about meditation, for example, that is actually such a great tool to help recuperation of the adrenal system. And when you talk about meditation like you had in your work scenario, it can be a little bit confronting, I think, for some people, because I think they do perceive that, well, if I'm not on my game all the time, then I'm not productive, when actually you can be very productive when you acknowledge that actually you need to take a step back and take some time out for yourself to actually heal and recuperate as well. And it's quite interesting because from an energetic point of view, the adrenal system, as you perhaps may know, from a chakra sense, is actually part of the root chakra as well. So that kind of deep down essence that we have about ourselves and our root chakra as well. And from a TCM point of view, so traditional Chinese medicine point of view, they review the adrenal system as part of the kidneys. They sit on top of the kidneys, but they look at the kidneys as part of, look at the adrenal system as part of the kidney energy. And that's your constitutional energy of an individual as well. So your constitutional chi of the body is actually your adrenal system as well. And I find that quite interesting from that particular perspective. When we look, I think, more broadly at organs in the body rather than just from an anatomy and physiology point of view, our organs also have a certain energy and also a certain time frame that they're at their peak as well. If we look at a 24-hour clock, organs within the body have a certain time period that they're most active in a 24-hour clock as well. So it's quite fascinating when you look at the body from a different point and a different perspective, I think, as well.
Absolutely. So it's very interesting from I've got so many, it's you helping me to connect a lot of the dots, because I see things with my clients from a mental emotional perspective coming in as well, and how it affects it. And I've started noticing, well, first of all, I read a statistic that about 80% of Americans have experienced adrenal fatigue at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
And might even notice that they have. And the symptoms that you've been, talking about is a lot of people that I know that are stuck in this job where they're like pushing 12, 14 hours a day. And it's just that no, I just need to do more. It's just until tomorrow. And I was on there. I'll sleep next week. I'll sleep next month. I just need to do this project, kind of a thing. And then you end up at a stage where your body just goes, no, you're going to lie down and you're going to. But, which I find very, very interesting from that perspective. But picking up on the chakras as well, I've started noticing, so with not only the root, but also into your throat with the thyroid and your third eye, which is why a lot of people don't get clarity. They aren't able to ground. I've started noticing. And with the energies, other energies that I found that are connected to adrenals is one of like defeatism, especially when it gets to those late stages where people are just getting to that stage where of like, I'm giving up. And it gets to a stage of not trusting oneself anymore and not caring for self. And that aspect of not trusting oneself is absolutely connected into the root chakra for sure. And they're not speaking up, they're not wanting to rock the boat, or, you know, that tends to happen as well. And I've also noticed a lot of adrenal fatigue then with toxic relationships, and that might be through friends, with managers, you know, at home, all the rest of that. You know, that started coming in to that, where one isn't able to speak one's truth, as John was saying.
Yes.
In that aspect, so you tend to suppress that, which is really, really interesting. So I love that you've brought in the anatomical and the natural way of looking at it, because I went through quite a stressful period moving back to Scotland, and I started picking up weight, and I was like, what is this? Right? Like, what is this that's going on? So I did my bloods were fine. And then I started noticing, they were like, we'll test your hormones. Because I was like, am I perimenopausal? Like, what's going on? And they would test some things and they wouldn't test others. Like, so I said, so this dude's cortisol. And they were like, no. And I was like, what? You know, things like that. So it's amazing how, like you say, you go to the doctor and it's kind of like they do tests, but I don't think they test the full range of what is going on with us as well. So it's always good to allow both medicines to kind of like work together. I think is very, very important, because a lot of people like, no, they say I'm fine, and then don't dig further to see, okay, what is going on with my system? Because medically it shows up, everything's fine. And we start to look at, okay, so if everything medically is fine, are the tests that have been missed, and then what is going on mentally and emotionally to support this as well. So it'll be quite interesting in seeing how you found with your clients showing up the physicality as to what is happening mentally and emotionally at the same time. So from doing it the other way, because I'll usually say to my clients, you should go get your adrenals tested. You know, send them off to somebody and go, perhaps this is what's going on. You should go get tested. So I'm wondering if you find that kind of like that thread that comes through on a mental emotional aspect to
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually, and we did touch on that a little bit, is that there is an element of when you're quite fatigued, and the elements of doubt, self-doubt, also creep in, like as you said, and self-worth. Am I worthy of, you know, XYZ, or this job, or this sort of stuff? That's very common for those elements, where it does play on your mental mind, and your mental ability as well. And then you can also have aspects of low mood and depression. And then you can go the other way as well, where people get very apprehensive and very anxious, and they're kind of vibrating at this really high energy level, but then they have elements of very low fatigue, where they kind of can't get out of bed, for example, and all they want to do is sleep all the time, which can also be a common thing. But as you said, the other thing that is actually quite important is sleep. People that do have, are very fatigued and exhausted, and do have adrenal burnout, they need to, I think, acknowledge their self that they need to have rest and recuperation, and they actually do need sleep. That's one of important factor, because I think, as you said, is that when you're tired and fatigued, you think, oh yeah, I'll catch up, you know, 8 hours tomorrow, or I'll catch up 9 hours tomorrow. And those hours actually may never come, and you can actually never catch up on sleep anyway. So you have the sleep circadian rhythm being also quite disturbed around that, which makes it even more difficult to recover when you're quite burnt out. I would certainly say that, you know, if there was a diagnosis of adrenal fatigue and burnout completely, where you're literally cannot function, it absolutely takes so much time. It's not a matter of, oh, you'll be okay in about 4 to 6 weeks. It can actually take people quite a number of months, perhaps even years, really, to acknowledge that they need to take the time to work on themselves and improve their overall health and status. And as you said, sometimes it infiltrates into other areas like relationships, and making that acknowledgement that perhaps you are in a toxic relationship and it's having quite a stressful toll on yourself can be quite challenging to make that change, because for many people change is quite difficult. And even acknowledgement that it's happening, sometimes we do live perhaps in an element of denial a little bit, when you just want to get better, but you don't want to acknowledge perhaps every single aspect that does need to be changed as well. So it can certainly be quite a journey for a lot of people. And I know, John, for you, it certainly took some time, I'm sure, to acknowledge that you were in that kind of scenario.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, I'm just coming out the end of it, and I wanted to touch on the cultural aspects as well. Is that in our certainly in our Western cultures here, it's almost like this. We're encouraged to be running on adrenaline all the time. And if I think back to the thousands of meetings I've been in over a 26-year career in software, it's like if you're sat there in a meeting and someone says, "John, we've got this problem. What are you going to do about it?" Like the kind of the best thing really to do as a human is to say, "Thank you for raising that. Just give me a moment. Let me have a think about that."
Yeah.
And almost
I
like
think the
just
hardest
take
thing
it
actually is to
really
say no,
slowly.
isn't it? When you're
Exactly.
in
Yeah,
that
exactly.
situation.
And even delaying in the moments, like the expectation is you're meant to answer. We encourage each other to like answer now, now, now. Everything's has to be done immediately. And to some of your earlier points, Michelle, about our phones are always with us. Our emails is an increasing expectation of high frequency responses. What I also wanted to add was when I started, so I just finished in May a year-long diploma in clinical reflexology, and I had literally never heard of the adrenals before then. And so the way reflexology simply works is that it's all the nerve endings come out in your hands and feet, and our nerves are attached to everything in our bodies. And we call them, in reflexology, we call them reflexes. And so there's one just above the kidney, which is the adrenals. And as the cool thing is about reflexology is that when you're touching those parts of someone's feet or hands, but I mainly work with feet, you feel how that organ feels, or how that part of the body. And the way I describe the touch of an adrenal gland that is like on overdrive is it feels quite swollen. It's almost like it's filled with like energy, but it doesn't feel good to touch, right? It feels like a balloon that's on kind of bursting point. And we kind of do like a hooking process where you kind of you're pressing against it gently and then letting go, and press against, letting go, and you're encouraging it to release at a steady state and relax. And of course, it has an effect, as you're saying, Michelle. It has an effect on all of your body, right? Your body's all listening to this lovely little adrenal gland that's going, "Hey, everybody, it's time for fight or flight." Oh, and by the way, that's every minute from every hour of every day from now on. That it's a really big thing that really affects your body in a massive way. And I think when we were talking about chakras, and I know from doing years of what is largely self-taught energy healing, I often see a very kind of shrunken solar plexus chakra for people struggling with adrenal burnout. And my intuition is that that's because they are, and I've had it myself, is that it's because we're unable to receive. We're unable to slow down and just go, you know what? Like slow and steady literally wins the race, that you can actually receive all the things that you're running around, John, in like a crazy little corporate day. You can just take time to allow yourself to really feel through and receive opportunities and ideas, and not push yourself and others around you to just achieve. And I found that was a big thing for me, was also doing continued work on my solar plexus and my adrenals, and seeing that there's a new John emerging since May, since I started my own company, just working for myself, doing energy healing and reflexology. Is that there's this John emerging, which is when he needs to be, he's animated and on the ball when he needs to, but it's often during specific periods of the day, and I can almost notice now that kind of ramping up and then the gradual resting down again.
Yeah.
And that's a whole new me. Like, my wife was telling me this yesterday. I was like, yeah, you're right. It's just totally different way of living. And I'm excited.
That's quite interesting. I wanted to ask you, when you do reflexology and you hit the adrenal reflex, if you find that your clients respond, do they kind of go, "Ooh," or did they go, "Ah"?
Yeah, I think when it's close to, I can't remember the definitions of the stages you were saying, but when it is close to burnout, it can be quite tender to touch.
Yeah.
And you learn to know when you're touching specific reflexes that if it feels quite hardened, or describe it as literally like quite crunchy under the skin, then that's when you'd probably ask your client, like, just how does this feel? Is this okay? Would you like me to be gentle? Would you like me? And some people are like, no, go really rough. And others are like, yeah, please be gentle. And you can also come back to it and check on it. And you're also saying, Michelle, like, I'd often do like 8 sessions for someone. Like, it wouldn't just turn up and I'll just fix your adrenals. We're done. Next.
Yes. It takes time, doesn't it? That's interesting. I've always loved reflexology as well. Not that I've ever practiced that. I used to get it on myself, but I also did a lot of iridology. So very similar, like reflexology. Your irises, or the colored part of your eyes, was so indicative and gave so much information about many functions and areas of the body, including the adrenal system, when all you need to do is just have an observation and look at the eye. And I really loved iridology. It was one of my tools in my clinic, for sure, along with saliva testing and the other sorts of tests that I did to help identify what the adrenals were at, what stage they were at. Was actually hair mineral analysis as well. And that's a fantastic non-invasive tool that I use quite extensively in my clinic to help identify heavy metal toxicity, nutrient depletions, and also how those nutrient depletions can have an impact on the endocrine system and also the adrenal system as well. So that was also a fantastic tool. But I love it that so many aspects of our body, our eyes, you can even identify the strength or the weakness of the adrenal gland through the pulse. They do that quite a lot in traditional Chinese medicine. Acupuncturists do that a lot, are very good at an element of touch to actually, they call it reading your pulse, but they're really feeling the nature of the pulse in the wrist as well. And they can identify so many things as well. But there's often great things that we can do. Like, as you said, you've done meditation for quite some time. And I've said that you do really need to rest and recuperate the adrenal system. So whether that's things like gentle yoga or gentle walking, or just, trying to sleep a little bit more and have good quality sleep to help establish the sleep circadian rhythm. But other things that perhaps are more practical for some people are things like dark green leafy vegetables are very important, and actually taking the time to eat and sit down and eat and really nourish your body with the types of foods that you're eating. And I always had an aspect of looking at food differently, rather than just, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, but looking at the energetic principles of food. And that was quite important when an individual was very fatigued and they were at their state of adrenal burnout as well. So to help really nourish your adrenal system, you need to really incorporate foods that are also very nourishing as well. And those types of foods tend to be predominantly cooked. cooked foods, very warming foods, foods that were easily assimilated relatively quickly, as opposed to, you know, lots of salads and raw vegetables that can be quite harsh on the digestive system. And also they're quite cold as well. You kind of need to eat foods in accordance to your climate and where you live as well. So I used to recommend things like porridge was very nourishing. Things like congee is actually a rehabilitation food that they use quite a lot in traditional Chinese medicine. It's like a soupy rice, and they eat it either sweet or savory, and it's very restorative for the adrenal system as well. And then you can kind of look at other things that, you know, if you were under the care of a naturopath practitioner or an acupuncturist or something like that, or you went perhaps into your Chinese supermarket, there are certain herbs that have a particular affinity for the adrenal system. And we call these adaptogens, meaning that they help the body adapt to stress better. So what can happen is that in many situations, perhaps individuals don't have the ability to actually change their situation. They do have to, I don't know, maintain that job that they're in. But there are certainly herbs that help you cope with that stress in a more productive way. So I don't know if you've heard of herbs like ashwagandha, which is a very popular adrenal tonic herb. It's also called withania. Romania is another herb, and also ginsengs. I don't know if you've heard of ginsengs, but the ginseng family, there's quite a number of ginsengs, and people perceive them to be quite stimulatory, or they, you know, they're not really appropriate for the adrenal system because they help with energy levels, and they're stimulating. But there are actually a few ginsengs that have a gentle, stimulating, restorative aspect to them. And one in particular I can think of is Siberian ginseng. That's actually a beautiful ginseng when the body is quite depleted and fatigued, and you're really trying to build the body up again and help restore those adrenal functions. And then as the adrenal system produces adrenal hormones, it's quite important to have the right types of fats in your diet as well. So whether you get that through foods or whether you actually take like an essential fatty acid supplement is also quite important. And then there's other nutrients as well that can certainly help with the adrenal system, such as magnesium and zinc, and vitamin C are also very important as well. So whilst, you know, that's a little bit of an insight of things to consider, it's not really prescriptive for your particular listeners, but it may give them an inkling or an idea if they feel as though that they may be in that state or coming up to that state of adrenal burnout. Then perhaps these things are something that you can consider, and perhaps see the advice of your healthcare professional, or like what you do, John, as a reflexologist. I think it can be quite insightful and relatively non-invasive, I think, to gently coax your patients and clients to say, oh, you know, are you under a little bit of stress at the moment, and what sort of stress is that that you feel that you're experiencing? So it's certainly a process for some individuals. Some people may just come to you, they know that they are at end of the tether, whilst others, you know, it may take a little bit time for them to acknowledge it, because maybe there's other aspects within their life that also need to be assessed and changed, and that can be quite challenging for sure.
I love that you brought in that aspect of food and what you put in to help to cope with that as well. And it's like you say, we need to implement that change, because otherwise we find ourselves back into that pattern again. And I certainly know for myself in the space of loving work, especially when you're doing what you love, it's hard to kind of like, because then it just feels like play. But it gets to those old patterns of kind of like, okay, why have I put too much into my calendar again? And it's those old habits that come in, that if we don't put other things like meditation, like yoga, like putting in those things in place, or even just making space and not working those 12, 18 hours, because surely
Yeah.
it's an indication that we're understaffed, or that something is not giving somewhere, but creating that change within our diet, within our our physical, our mental, our emotional, and our spiritual aspect as well. So I love that you've brought that in as some tools that help to cope. But I certainly have noticed that if we don't actually make those changes, we'll find ourselves back into that pattern,
Yes.
into that same cycle. So it's actually looking at, okay, what is the source of the cycle? What am I making it mean? And all the rest of that, I think is quite important to actually have a look at or consider. I found myself at burnout once
Yeah.
again. Like, what can I do to change it in that sense so that I don't find myself? What are the habits, that need to be shifted? So I think that's quite important as well. And I love that you've like those changes need to be implemented for sure.
Mhm.
The other thing that I was going to bring up that I wrote notes on, how do we change the culture at work? Because a lot of the times, John, like when you were saying that, kind of like, I've been working and doing this adrenaline, and it's almost kind of like it's revered, like, oh my goodness, that person works 18 hours.
Yeah.
They managed to do this. I want to be just like them, kind of a thing. And it kind of like one almost feels guilty about taking that holiday, taking that break, working those 8 hours instead of those 18 hours. Like, how do we start to shift that?
Yeah, and just to share a little bit, what I didn't know at the time was that I was quite intimidating to others because I'd learn, first thing I'd learned is how to do interviews whilst typing because we had to take notes,
All
almost
right.
transcribe. And from doing that for years and actually being present with the person, eye contact, touch typing the whole time. I'd come out of the meeting all the minute, I'd literally just hit enter as I left the interview, and that was my decision. And we'd go to, we'd meet later for a debrief. I carried that into meetings. So I'd spend 10 hours in meetings all day working at the same time, which is shocking to think back. And I, people would say to me at like my, annual reviews, they'd say, John, it's difficult to work with you because you're so fast and productive. And it's intimidating, like because you'll say you're going to do something and you actually do it, and you do it that day. And some of these things I thought were really good, right? I thought that it was great to keep my promises, and especially for customers and my managers and leaders. And what I realized what I was really doing was getting really good at being really burnt out and really fast, at least at being a noisy person that just looked very busy, like a busy fool. It's probably another way of thinking about it. But for the moments that someone would give me some clarity, or I would find that in something like meditation, I would realize that actually the biggest wins that I was making in my work and with my customers in my career were those moments in nature, in the shower, the times on holiday, the weekends when I wasn't just recovering in sleep and the the massive fatigue. And I was starting to realize that there was this receiving part that I was missing, and that actually that rest, especially, it's a funny thing to say, like rest during work is really important because it is incredibly productive. Because I used to have a manager that said, you can never innovate under pressure. And that always stuck with me. I always felt like if you're under pressure, how do you innovate? All you'll ever do is innovate to get out of that situation, and then you'll go straight into the next. But if you really want to succeed, you really need to innovate for the longer term and figure out every present moment. Like, are you focusing on the right things for your customers and yourself? And yeah, I don't have all the answers for how to change the culture, but I think the first thing is seeing so many of the warning signs that Michelle has raised. Because frankly, like you could just walk into the companies I've worked in, and most people would behave like at least on one of those stages. and many, like an alarming amount of people seeing it's perfectly normal, getting your Starbucks, other coffees are available, starting the day all like adrenaled up and just going as fast as they can until the end of the day. And I think the first thing is like learning the productive, like the business and productive and the health benefits of pausing even for 10 minutes, for half an hour, like, or taking your lunch break, or like starting to see some of those other aspects of you that are being hidden because you're running around so fast.
Yeah. I think when you talk about culture, Natasha, it's certainly, I think it has to come from the top down as well. I mean, it comes from the bottom up, but especially I think in my particular role, where I work currently, I do feel as though that you do have to allow, as you said, John, the ability to receive, and that can be quite difficult for some people to actually, have receivership. And I think if you work in a high-end business where it is supposed to be innovative, or you do work in an industry that is very innovative, I think that aspect that you do need to allow your employees that downtime. They can't constantly be on all the time, because it doesn't really allow creativity to flourish if they're on all the time. From my personal experience, I've often been in the shower and I've got, oh my goodness, yes, that is such a fantastic idea. I would do that. It's actually in those moments when you're not thinking about anything at all, that you do have these ideas come to you. And I think it's also about receiving as well, and putting out there to the world what you want to receive, and be specific about what you want to receive. I think personally, but if you're in a job where it is a creative role, you have to think on your feet all the time. I think some of the best creations come when you're actually not thinking about work at all. And I think it is a bit of a hard cultural thing to change when you've got to really trying to change the management of and allow their employees to actually stop and take a moment to allow receiving to ensure, for sure.
And I think all roles have a creative aspect to them as well. Even in accounting, coming up with solutions and looking at that is, I mean, if something's not working, if figures aren't jumping in, a lot of people are like, just take a walk and then come back to it. It's that pause. You'll see it, what you're missing, which is really important. And I think managers really do start to exemplify them and insist on it as well. In that sense of like, why are you working overtime? Like, what's going on? Like, why are you still here? In a sense of not as in a judgment, but like, is there an issue with what is, like, where is the single point of failure that we're needing to overexert ourselves? I absolutely agree with that. But yeah, that's wonderful information that you've provided. It's brilliant. Thank you.
The other theme I feel at the heart of some of the potential causes for adrenal burnout is as simple as self-love. And I've struggled with that for so many years, often seeking it outside of me, like, I need a job title, I need like a salary, I need to work for a specific company, I need to launch a project, I need to do this thing. And then at the cost of myself and my health and my relationships and my family, and not realizing the impact of putting these other things first, and also just simply not getting that self-love is important. And why would self-love be important in business for many of the things that we've discussed today? But it really made me think, as Natasha's saying, like, if you really love yourself, and you can show yourself through the act of self-care, when it comes to the end of the working day, you can close your laptop, you can leave the office or your home office, and you can say, it doesn't matter that I didn't get all my to-do list done. It doesn't matter that I had a hard day or a bad day. I still love myself. I'm still here for myself. And these are the things I do to show myself each day. And what did I spend 26 years doing? Most of it at the end of each day going, John, you could have done that better. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you make so many mistakes? Why didn't you speak your truth to those people? why don't you stand up for yourself? And like just negative self-talk, and almost your body's like, I don't want to finish today's work, because as soon as I do, my brain's just going to give me negative self-talk the whole time. And we did a meditation on like your kind of perfect day, Natasha, didn't we? And it was one of the big things I think is also in the theme of receiving as well as self-care is like, when you've had a hard meeting, or when you've just completed a big deadline or some event that it's very tempting to just go on and keep going afterwards. They're the perfect times to show yourself that you do love and take care of yourself. And they're perfect times to put in your calendar half an hour or an hour you've gone for a walk, or you've taken time out, maybe you've taken a nap, like whatever it is you've done. And there's something I did at my previous employer, a global corporate, and I did it with a team, and I said to the manager, I'm going to do this meditation, and it tells people to do this in the meditation, to take time out. They've had big events, and so they're going to put these things in their calendar, because I'm going to tell them to do it in the meditation. And right enough, after over the next week, we met again. We're saying, loads of people are doing it there. It's great, like the difference in them. They're coming, they recover so fast, because if they just push through, they're carrying this like energetic baggage from difficult meetings. And this particular team dealt with compassionate care, so they were dealing with a lot of deaths and helping support families. And so it was traumatic for them too. But a lot of their experiences and the emotions also resonated with some of the vice president presentations I've done, or things that are big in the moments, and you feel like, my body needs time and care and love to recover. And if I just railroad myself through it and just drink some more coffee and keep pushing, then I'm just storing that up for another time, and it lightly festering and getting worse.
Yeah, that's true. And then what happens is that you end up building on these incidences and just putting them to the side, but really they do catch up with you in the end, and then can come crashing down for sure on you. And then that's where you have to come to the realization, I think, that you've actually got to acknowledge what has happened, and you need to actually stop and recuperate and take time out to perhaps look within as well, because sometimes when we are feeling tired and fatigued, and even before we get to the stage of adrenal burnout, we certainly expedite that sort of feeling perhaps onto others, and blame others for how we are feeling, when perhaps what we need to do is actually look within and look at ourselves. And an element of that is also about self-reflection and self-love, and yeah, for sure. So
I think when we're going through those critical times, it's like we need more love, not less. And a lot of the critical mind comes in. It's like these flowers, if they start withering, I'll change their water, I'll change them, I'll put them somewhere else. I'll try do something, well, the one that's planted, but I'll try and do something to help it along. And I think we tend to forget that, we tend to feed ourselves, we tend to change our environment, we just criticize ourselves even more, which takes us further into that aspect as well. And I don't know who said it, if you don't have time to meditate, then you need to meditate twice as long.
That's right.
And it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't have time to love yourself, you need to love yourself twice as much, I suppose, or take care of yourself twice as much, because that is when you're absolutely needing it. And that normally is the first thing that goes out the window when we're super stressed and super busy, is our own self-care. We put ourselves on the burner and allow that to continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true.
Shall we meditate? Speaking of meditation.
Yeah, speaking of meditation.
Excellent. So feel free to join us, or do you have a few more minutes? Would you like to join us, Michelle?
Yes, that would be lovely.
Okay. Shall I do this one today?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, let's jump in. Let's close our eyes. Let's take a couple of deep breaths. Breathing in through our mouth, in through our noses and out through our mouths. Let's imagine we're breathing in calm and releasing all that no longer serves. As we exhale, we release, we let go of the tension, the stress, the anxiety. Continuing to breathe deeply and completely, finding a rhythm that is ideal for you. And let's imagine we've got a light coming in from above, penetrating the top of our heads, dropping in to the center of our minds, breathing in light, removing the busy mind, slowing down the thoughts, allowing this light to move through the hypothalamus, the pineal gland, pituitary glands, bringing in calm as this light moves down, making its way down the spine. We start to focus in into the throat, allowing this light to wash over the thyroid, parathyroid glands, releasing all that no longer serves, activating the ability to speak up, to speak our truth in ways that we are heard, that we are understood, and bringing this gland into balance. As we continue to allow this light to move down into our heart space, expanding into our chest, releasing the need for any toxic relationships, toxic entanglements, whether it be with our food, with people around us, our working environments. Letting go, releasing, removing, dissolving all that no longer serves. And as that starts to release, we start to reactivate unconditional love and radical self-acceptance. Allowing this light to continue to move down into our solar plexus. Allow this light to dissolve all that no longer serves. Recalling all aspects of our strength and our power. Recalling the strength, the will, the ability to choose ourselves, to love ourselves, to support ourselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Activating the will to make the changes that we need to make in order to live our lives from a place of abundance in health, wealth, happiness, joy, and love. And let's allow this light to continue to make its way down, flooding our liver, our pancreas, our spleen, releasing the tension, the stress, the anxiety that we carry in these organs. Exhaling them, bringing in calm as we continue to breathe deeply and completely, allowing this light to focus in to our sacral, releasing the stuck, releasing the blocks to manifesting the ideal life that we envision for ourselves, activating our creativity, and our ability to manifest into physical reality that which we envision for ourselves. And let's continue to bring this light down into the base of our spine, our root chakra. Releasing any anger, any lack of trust that we hold, any fears of change, and clearing the energy of defeatism. And let's allow this energy to move throughout our nervous system, bringing in calm. Now let's bring in this energy into our adrenals. Allow this energy to release, remove, dissolve all that's no longer serving, allowing it to bring balance, recharge, re-energize. And as it starts to recharge our battery packs, allow this energy to continue to move through and recharge our entire system, entire endocrine system, balanced, re-energized. And now let's allow this light to move through every single cell within our bodies. Releasing the tension, the stress, the patterns that we carry. That lead us to burnout. And let's expand this energy beyond the physical body into our auric field. Auric field carrying the energetic body or the etheric body that energizes the physical body. Let's breathe light into this body, releasing any static, distortion, interference. any blocks, allowing the energy to flow freely. Allow this light to then continue filling our entire auric field, releasing emotions that we carry that are not ours, dissolving any thought forms that we carry of judgment, of criticism, and releasing, removing, dissolving any thought patterns that no longer serve. And let's allow our energies to align with the highest aspect of who we are, allowing the energy to flow freely throughout all bodies, and allowing the energy centers at the soles of our feet to open up and allow the energy to connect, merging our energies with that of Mother Earth, bringing in a grounded, calm, nurturing energy. Being grounded helps us to not only bring in calm, but clarity. It activates our creativity. It activates the ability to nurture ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally. Allowing all systems to become balanced, activating the energy to its utmost potential, conducive to allowing us to move throughout our days with happiness, with joy, with balance, giving us the ability to make the decisions that are in alignment with the highest potential of ourselves, our teams, and those things that are important to us. And as we make our way back to the here and now, completely grounded, completely centered, completely connected, we are ready to face the day. We are ready to enter our dream time if that's what we're doing. And we are able to move forward with courage, with calm, with nourishment. Take a deep breath and exhale as you make your way back to the here and now. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. I didn't want to come back. It was so good. That was really incredible.
Lovely.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been so informative. I'm sure a lot of people have come to realize that they have a bit of adrenal something going on, and absolutely connecting to speaking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming along, Michelle.
Absolutely. It's been such a fantastic pleasure and so lovely to meet up with you again. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
My pleasure. I'll stop our recording just then and look forward to seeing everyone next week. Thank you so much, everyone.